Chad Moyer with you here on the Rural Radio Network. It is time for another Fridays in the Field, brought to you by FNBO, the Great Big Small Bank. And we're in North Bend, Nebraska this week. We're visiting with Chuck and Nick Emanual from North Bend. They are our Fridays in the Field farmers here for eastern Nebraska. First of all, Chuck and Nick, thank you so much for taking the time and visiting with us here and being our farmers for this season in this area. Chuck, we'll start with you. Just give us a little bit of background about you and your family and the farming operation.
Okay, back in 1974, we started a corporation, Charles Emanual and Sons. And at that time, my brother Paul and I were together. And then since then, he's pretty much kind of retired. And Nick has came back from the university and worked with us, and now is part of that farming operation.
All right, sounds great. Family operation. Chuck, tell us about the farm itself, the crops kind of size and scope.
Yeah, we originally we started out, we milked cows, had pigs, and since then we're just strictly a corn soybean rotation farming operation. Lease out our hog buildings, but go from there.
About 2,000 acres.
2,000 acres in a corn and soybean rotation, right?
Correct.
Yep, all right. Since we're so close to the Platte River here, I wanted to ask if there was any leftover or residual issues from the flood last year. How were you guys affected, and did that affect how 2020 started for you guys?
Yeah, fortunately our farm was not directly impacted or affected by the flood. The water stopped about a mile south of the farm we're at here right now. So the miles expanded from the river about 2 miles north, and our farm again did not have any direct impact, so we've recovered fairly well. There was a lot of ground along the river in those 2 mile stretch that did have a lot of preventive planting acres last year, and took up all the way until planting this year to get fully cleaned up and recovered to get more crops back in the ground this season.
Yeah. So Nick, there was some even activity this year that had to deal with cleanup from the flood last year, huh?
Exactly. There was some that had so much impact from sand carried in from the waters that they couldn't even get into until this last winter and early springtime to get it even cleaned up.
All right. Well, Nick, let's focus on this year. How has the start of the 2020 crop season affected you guys here so far?
Yeah, so far it's really been an up and down season, kind of a roller coaster, and I think farmers are probably used to hearing that or experiencing that to some level. But it started off fairly quickly. We were able to get into the field about that mid-April. I think we started planting around April 20th here ourselves. We had exceptional planting conditions. The soil conditions were very mellow and very good moisture at the time of planting, but then things tapered off and we got really hot and dry very quickly. Seed beds dried out fairly quickly, and we started experiencing some emergence problems that then shortly after that dry period, then it got cold and a little damp again. And so there was some up and down emergence from field to field. But more importantly, probably that dry weather caused some challenges with herbicide activation and fertilizer efficiency. And so right here in this kind of North Bend area, there were several pivots getting started to try to activate those herbicides and increase that fertilizer efficiency. But since then, we've got some moisture here in the last couple of weeks, and obviously the heat has been a big impact and really got those crops started and off going to a better than what they initially did.
So the challenges that you talked about there, did that have an effect to the point of you had to do some replant or kind of shift gears in any way?
Unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, no, and which was a big opposite of last year. You know, even though we weren't directly impacted by the flood, there was some replant that happened just because of the challenges with the wetter spring we had last year. This year there wasn't much replant anywhere in this kind of area or eastern side of the state. But it was more just delayed emergence and probably uneven emergence that will probably have some effect on final yield in the end.
Yep. Nick, is there anything from a crop production standpoint related to diseases or insects or anything that you're kind of keeping your eye on at this point?
I think the next several weeks will really tell that story. Right now, as I said, the warmer weather and the recent moistures we've got have really accelerated the growth on the crop. So the corn and soybeans have both taken off, and we really haven't seen disease or insect pressure quite yet. The soybean insect pressure is always something to be watching for in the next several weeks. For us mainly, and most of the growers in this area, finishing up post-application herbicide spraying on corn right now. That corn is anywhere from that V5 to V7 leaf stage. And we will be beginning the post bean herbicide applications here in the next week or two.
Okay. One thing we want to spend a little time on, because it did happen this week, there were some fairly severe storms that rolled through Dodge County and parts of eastern Nebraska. And just driving here, I saw a couple of pivots turned over. So even already this season, we've had some tough weather, huh?
Yeah, kind of going back to that roller coaster type of year. It was going back to Memorial Day. We got hit with a storm on that Saturday evening that blew over about a dozen pivots in this area, probably in about a 15-mile radius. But last night was more kind of directly impacted. We had a storm come out of the south around 5 o'clock last night and blew over, I think I've heard about a half a dozen pivots, just in probably a mile stretch to the west of here.
Okay, and I noticed some corn is kind of leaning over. Do you think that'll come out of it, or is it going to be goosenecked here?
It's, again, kind of early to tell right now. The worst time to always look at that corn is the day after. I remember my grandpa always saying, wait 2 days before you even go look at the corn after a storm. But we're fortunate enough it's at the growth stage, that V5 to V7, V6 stage, that most of it should come out of it fine. Maybe a little bit of gooseneck, but not as much as it would be if it was V8 or later.
Okay, so that kind of brings us up to now, I would say, Nick. What's on the docket immediately in front of you? What are you going to kind of be focusing on here in the fields?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we're going to be finishing up post-application on herbicide corn, have just a few acres left on that, then getting started on the beans here next week. And then our big thing is we put the majority of our fertilizer and nitrogen on in season to try to improve that nitrogen use efficiency. And so we will begin fertigating and in-season nitrogen applications here in the next 10 days.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much for taking the time, and good luck till we talk to you again, okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, we've been visiting with Chuck and Nick Emanual from North Bend, Nebraska, our Fridays in the Field farmer here in the northeast part of the state. On Fridays in the Field, brought to you by FNBO, the Great Big Small Bank. Here on the Rural Radio Network, Chad Moyer reporting.